Yeah, I thought you did great. I think you're supposed to start. Hello? Hi. Hello? No. We're one mic down.
Testing. Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, so this is the content convergence, the future of gaming and media. My name is Kristina Cologne. I am the senior corporate counsel of a 200-person media technology company that focuses on digital asset exploitation. We acquire copyrighted content and we exploit them in various forms of VOD. We also have our own platform, and it's its own experience to be at the ground level working in an industry that has been a legacy company in broadcast and now is making its way through the VOD and now having its own application and now exploiting assets that not only it's acquiring, but that it's producing. So.
And I am Daniel Lehrich.
I don't think you're on.
Off. Hello. I'm pretty loud, but I don't know if it'll work for the live stream. So I'm currently general manager of Netflix Gaming. I had to read it off of there because we got bought 3 months ago by Netflix, and I'm still figuring all that out. My background is in gaming. Was a creative director at Activision, worked on Guitar Hero, worked at Disney on Disney Infinity, a couple other games like that. And then I spent 4 years working at an augmented reality company called Magic Leap, working on augmented reality content and gaming. Then got back more into more traditional gaming over the last couple of years. So from my perspective and from the things I've seen, the way that, we're taking in Guitar Hero traditional linear songs and adapting them into gameplay, but then also just the way that the rights work for those things and the way that you protect yourself and the way that you look to integrate them and the way you look for opportunities to create new experiences on top of existing content, forge brand new experiences together collectively with other people, have lived around that world quite a bit. And, obviously at Netflix, Netflix investing in gaming heavily right now, very publicly. I think what I'm seeing, I think what we're all seeing is every media company trying to become a gaming company and every gaming company trying to become a media company. And what you're going to end up with something in the middle that is going to be both and neither at the same time. So we'll try to unpack that over the next little bit here.
Yeah, so to Daniel's point and how everyone's trying to become a gaming company, I also think that a lot of providers are trying to just get into digital exploitation in general. And so I know that from our side, what we're experiencing actually is a shortage in content. So when we're looking forward and we're looking into the future of gaming, we're looking into the future of media, we're looking at a shortage of assets, of digital assets to exploit. So we're now looking at, for instance, the general public and bloggers or vloggers and how they're going to now be able to participate in this convergence of gaming and media. And also, like we discussed earlier today, the idea of, okay, we have a shortage of content. Now what? How are we going to create more games? Well, we're going to now gamify regular everyday life experiences. And that's now going to be part of our everyday experience. You wake up in the morning, you have the mirror, which is this fitness model that you're able to utilize. And so you start tacking some gamification onto that and some of the ways that can even continue to develop. And now you're looking at completely different experience of what we now perceive as reality.
Yeah, actually, just piggybacking on that, I think it's a really, really good point about a lot of traditional companies, media companies needing to create more and more content. And you've got these streaming wars and everybody's greenlighting all these shows. And from the other side of things, from the more traditional gaming side, there's a game that's really successful gets a lot of engagement over a long period of time with a relatively finite amount of content that can be enjoyed over and over again. And so the opportunities to, take what is more linear and traditional media and bring it into those spaces, potentially you can create, longer engagements with your consumers with creating less things or creating fewer things. Now the level of complexity can change over time, but that's one way that I've seen a lot of media companies that are looking at the interactive space thinking about that. They're saying, okay, how can we take these things that you can watch from beginning to end in 2 hours and make them relevant to you over days, weeks, and months, without relying on you just wanting to watch that film over and over again. And so, I think that the future of taking these things together, you're going to see more linear content made with that interactivity in mind from the very, very beginning. And I think people are going to look at that as ways to make these experiences much more dynamic over time.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking to provide a hook, right? It's like that. Was it like a Hootie and the Blowfish song, The Hook?
Yeah,
yeah.
You're more of the Hootie fan than me.
I figured I was in the good area for that, but
this is
hook.
a Hootie town. That's true. Yeah, right. This is a Hootie town, right?
But it's this hook though, right? It's the
I think
hook.
I have that. Wait, do I have that right? I just want to make sure. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you.
So, well, I think that was mine, right?
That was great.
So, all I'm trying to say is that this is a hook. They're trying to hook you. They're trying to get you involved more, and it's going to start becoming more and more relevant, particularly if you're starting to look at the gamification of everyday experiences, and then you start to tack on more pieces of information. For instance, biometrics. How are we going to start utilizing those pieces of information to make this gamified experience in your day-to-day life more relevant to you? So guess what? We can hook you. That way we can now maybe get more ads to you. And now maybe we're starting to frame the way that you're thinking more. So let this be an opportunity for people to pull back for a minute and think, okay, what it is that I'm naturally engaging in, and the internet is now becoming its own feedback loop. And it's only going to become more and more intense if we don't keep our eyes open to it, or we're going to start feeding into the monster. We're going to essentially start baiting ourselves, because we're going to provide our own experience into whatever it is that we're utilizing. It's going to start creating a feedback loop. And then before you know it, you're being kind of taught how to think. So you have to really be careful of those sorts of things. But that really is the future of where we're going. It's this convergence of the biometrics, of your user features that you prefer, that we're all keeping track of. And then the way that it starts to really interplay into these day to day.
Yeah, I think when you have access to, just to your point, to biometric data, your heart rate, or when we were working at Magic Leap, we were tracking your eyes. Where were you looking at all times? It's a double-edged sword. I think from a creative standpoint, it's extremely exciting and extremely juicy to think that you can more closely tie an experience to people's biometrics. If you're making a game that involves scaring people and you can track somebody's heart rate, the way that you can play off of that is really interesting from a creative perspective. On the flip side of that, it is incredibly scary sometimes to think about the big companies that aggregate and take all this biometric data. You are the lawyer, and data privacy is your thing. And so when I've ever been involved in something like that, I know we've taken data privacy very seriously, and we've worked really closely with lawyers to make sure that we're doing it correctly and safely, but it is a little bit of a slippery slope. And I think that's to be acknowledged. I think that, when you step back from biometric data, though, and you look at the other sort of things that, can come out of this, I think that, socialization and community, you're seeing this throughout the pandemic, that, people are trying to socialize on Zoom, or they're making appointments to play video games and together. Right now, literally today, there's a short film festival happening inside of Fortnite, where you can go into Fortnite. They've selected a bunch of short films. You and a party of people can go into a special Fortnite level where you're just watching these movies together, and there's no fighting or anything going on. There's been other great examples of Fortnite having like concerts with Travis Scott, where millions of people are watching simultaneously. And so you're also seeing media companies cross over into these spaces where people are already coming together, they're already socializing together, they're already creating communities and fandom together. And I think that aspect of what kind of the gaming side of things brings to the table is something that I think a lot more traditional media people might be really attracted to. I mean, you tell me. I know that there's looking at eyeballs, word of mouth, and virality of content.
Yeah, so every company is going to be looking at something different. I think that just to get out of the pie in the sky clouds, this is going to happen in the year 2050 sort of a thing. when we start to look at something that's maybe a little closer around the bend, we're looking at making sure that our vendor agreements are in line, because the way that gaming and media are going to converge are going to be utilizing various technologies. And I know a lot of people in this room are vendors of these technologies. So, and from that data side, we really need to make sure that the data protection is baked in. It's baked into the contracts that you're offering to the people that you're contracting with. Because I can tell you right now that every time I get one of your vendor agreements, the first thing I'm looking is, are you GDPR compliant? Are you CCPA compliant? Are you a giant liability for the company? I mean, maybe you're going to offer some sort of service that's going to make whatever it is that we're doing quicker. I mean, I can give you literally 100 examples. But at the end of the day, if you're going to be a liability because you either are not able to protect the data that's going to be flowing through you, or you're completely blind to it because it's something that you've not prioritized. I mean, these sorts of brass tacks, this is what I was talking about downstairs. A lot of times we get really stuck with this whole pie in the sky, Web3, but the majority of us are still on the ground. We're still these legacy companies and we're moving forward. So when we're starting to really bring those things together, it starts to become a much more dynamic picture. And that's just taking it from, the year 2050, like what we were just riffing on a moment ago, and making it a little bit more relevant into 2030. Like this is the second step before going to the third, the fourth, the fifth.
Yeah, I mean, that access is crucial. I mean, even, in addition to the data privacy, things that are happening right now, we were talking about this earlier, when they created the early Guitar Hero games, the way that they licensed the music was limited in scope, limited in the platforms, limited in utility. Then those games become the biggest games ever. They want to re-release them. They have to go back to every single record company and relicense those songs. But they've lost a lot of leverage because now this is the biggest thing in the world and everybody wants more money than they used to. And so, thinking about setting up, if you're creating content, you're creating creative IP, you're creating characters, worlds, stories, and you want to bring them across media, you want to bring them into film that you want to make and have them be in games that other people want to make. The way you set up the infrastructure legally and the framework for the way that your IP can be used, reused, remixed, the way you think about that, I think is critically important. The way that you build and actually produce that content is also really important because, these platforms all have different requirements in terms of the fidelity of their assets. I've worked on, adaptations of movies into video games. And sometimes they'll provide you with the film ready assets, which are these, if you're a computer graphics person, extremely high polygon, extremely dense, very, very complicated 3D models that look amazing on film when you can take a supercomputer overnight to render a frame, but will not run in real time on somebody's phone or on the web. And so a lot of the work is to take this really pretty asset and decimate it in some way. Make it smaller, make it lower fidelity. But there are ways to create from the beginning with that in mind and to put hooks into the way that you build things so that they decimate appropriately or automatically. And just access overall, the legal framework that you use your IP and the way you create your content is going to open up possibilities for you or completely, I think, limit what you can do with the things you have.
Yeah. And I think just to piggyback off that as well, and this is very in line with what I was sharing downstairs, invite the lawyer to the table, right? So you would think that you don't necessarily need an attorney to be there in your biz dev conversation. You have all these ideas, these strategies. Instead of having a business personnel value judge a choice, just have your attorney sit at the table. You can direct them, hey, I don't want your real-time feedback. I just want to hear what it is that you have to say. And then let's discuss it later on in a private one-on-one, fine. But I can't tell you how often I'm the last one to hear about something. And I have a slew of business personnel that have value judged these elements that they think are, well, this is where the regulation issue is, or this is where our liability issue is. And it's one of those moments where it's always, all due respect, but at the same time, like, bless your heart, right? Like, is that
Yeah.
not exactly what it is though? Because you have people that think that's important, but it's not the way that it is. And we all have blind spots. I have blind spots. I'm not, some wizard in what it is that he's doing, and vice versa. So just like I said downstairs, there's an element of humility and just inviting different people to the table to make sure that as this stuff starts to really reach its peak, that you have privacy built in, that you have all of these due diligence elements already baked in. That way you're not turning the corner and all of a sudden you're surprised. So this isn't just a 2050 conversation. This is a how is this going to happen in real time to actually get to this convergence. So that's a little bit more of a pathway for you.
Yeah, plus a million on that one. I was raised by lawyers, so I think that I was more attuned to them than many people in my position. But in addition to the value judgment you're talking about, I know that as a creative, I also get really excited. And the more excited I get, and the more enthusiastic I am, and the more attached I am, the harder it is when it all comes crashing down, when it's pointed out to me that I'm, creating a leverage situation that's not going to work or something like that. And so, I really have valued, and again, this cuts across every aspect of creating content, from the infrastructure to the IP, to the distribution, everything in between. There are ways that you can set yourself up, especially in this new world where you're seeing all these crossovers and you're seeing all of these, cross compatibility plays happening. You can set yourself up to be ready for that, anticipating of the future. A really smart lawyer can help you understand the places that technology can go that your agreements don't contemplate, or platforms that might spring up in the future that you might be at a disadvantage for. So I agree with that. When you're conceiving of an idea, it's different when you're conceiving of a way to execute that idea in such a way that it can reach the potential that you're hoping for. And as soon as you get to the phase where you have more than an idea at all from a creative standpoint, especially now, I think it's important to take the structure and the protection of those things. And again, not just protection, but you want people to exploit those things, and you need to create the foundation for people to exploit those things. It's really, really important to think about that from the very beginning. And otherwise you'll be catching up forever and you'll always be behind.
And also, that's not to say you should invite every lawyer to the table. I think that there are some lawyers that are just, look, being an attorney is an archaic profession. There's just no way of getting around it, right? I mean, it's just what it is. And so it's important to make sure that there's a certain mentality around the attorney that you're inviting to the table. You don't want it to be a situation where you've invited an attorney who literally is a wet blanket, is a no person. It's really important that you have somebody that is I want to make it happen, but let's make sure this happens the right way. I'm not saying no, I'm saying let's figure it out. And the truth is that a lot of my clients, because this is a client that I have, I own the law office of Kristina, PA, and that's my gig. I work with this company. And so it was very difficult for me to come in and to tell them, hey, I want to make it work, but let's figure out the right way to make it work. They, in their head, had thought that if I said pause, that meant no. It's not the case. You want to make sure that you have a person in the room that's not going to, for lack of a better words, poo-poo on your idea. They're going to say, all right, let's do it. Let's put some wheels on this, but let's also make sure that we're not going to get looped in to various regulatory fines or, illegal exploitation of a digital asset because maybe you didn't acquire those rights in the right way. So, it's important who you have at the table and the type of personality. And sometimes that involves maybe a little pep talk, maybe a little vetting, make sure that you know who's there, that it's not just the accolades that they're representing, but that the mentality is also in alignment with what it is that you're seeking to get done.
Yeah. It's the Wild West for a lot of these things still. And so in a lot of cases, there's not a complete framework way of always doing this. There's certain things that are table stakes with data privacy and things like that. But when you're getting creative about the way you want to use and reuse content, a lot of times you're exploring use cases that may not be widely understood. And so there's no like, oh yeah, that's just how we paper this deal. If you want to go put a song into a movie, there's a standard way you kind of do that. And there's some variation, but it's mostly just the same thing over and over again. I have music supervisor friends that I love to death, but I don't want their jobs and I don't envy that part of the process. You know, when I was working on certain advanced music gaming concepts, you know, part of the job was to go to the people that own that content and try to convince them this was a good idea and explain it to them, and then turn around to the attorney next to me and say, okay, now that everybody agrees that this is okay, how do we write this so that we actually can ensure we can do these things? And that kind of partnership means that you get these brand new use cases, you get these brand new sorts of convergence happening, and it doesn't happen any other way.
I definitely think that old adage of the measure twice, cut once is very applicable here, because you can have a whole team of technologists take something and carry it, you know, 1 inch away from the finish line. And then you bring it over to the lawyer to make sure that you're not going to get nailed. And then, you know, dun, 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 here it goes. Like the whole thing gets scrapped because there's some issue that nobody snuffed out, because nobody brought it to legal, because legal is the no department, or legal is the one that stops the flow of our opportunities or the revenue. You know, it's legal. We're the cost center and we're also the first to blame, but we're not the ones that are responsible. So, you know, it's really important to build that team the way that you want it to actually function.
You know, it's really interesting. I was just thinking about this while you're talking, and I didn't really think about this ahead of time, but like some of the most interesting things that I think are happening in the convergence of gaming is a tricky word, let's call it interactivity and media, are actually happening in real life. And I like, if you're familiar with like Sleep No More and in New York, Sleep No More kind of invented or popularized this genre of sort of interactive theater. And you're seeing that kind of pop up all over the place. You're seeing, you know, so many blurrings of the lines. Now that same company, Punch Drunk, is starting to run full on festivals. I think they're running like a Walking Dead festival where for 3 days you can pretend like you're in The Walking Dead if that's what you're into.
Cool.
And you know, like I think HBO did a really big thing at South by Southwest a couple years ago where you could go to like Westworlds and actually go to the town and have that experience. And man, you know, I never really thought about it before, but it must be a lot easier when it's all physical assets and not digital. And maybe I'm in the wrong business. So anybody who's in a theater, come find me afterwards. Let's change teams here. But sorry, I just like the digital stuff makes things more complicated. It just does. And you end up with, I think, less control of that over the long haul, because it can live forever. It can be copied and replicated. It can be captured and shared in ways that you don't anticipate.
I'm just curious, how many attorneys are in this room? We have two lawyers, and there's probably what, like 50 people in here?
And I'm up here like, get a lawyer. So, you know.
Yeah, no, and you know, I was just asking because sometimes it's important to understand the demographic, not only in the room, but in the conference, to understand what everyone's bringing to the table. I think that sometimes we can hide behind our badges, you know, and so it's important for us to be open to those things. So we have only a few minutes left, and if anybody had any questions of any sort, or if any of the lawyers in the room wanted to tack on to some of these real world experiences, just wanted to be open for that.
All right.
Okay. All right.
In absence of questions.
Yeah. So I guess nobody else is doing the slog of legacy to digital and beyond.
I think everyone's still tired from climbing up here. I know I am. Yeah, I just, you know, I think just in terms of, you know, just commenting a little bit more on the sort of the creative side of this whole thing, you know, there are more mashups happening in gaming than ever before. You know, you're seeing every new Marvel movie, those characters show up in Fortnite. I think they just announced Godzilla and King Kong are going to be in Call of Duty, because why not, right? They've had zombies in Call of Duty for 10 years. What's the difference? So the right now, though, those things, in my opinion, are they're not that different than what we were doing with Disney Infinity 10 years ago. It's just you're kind of taking all these things that kind of don't really belong together and you're shoving them into one place and you're trying to figure out how to make that interesting. And those can be interesting and exciting, but I think the real future here, and the thing that I think is the most interesting going forward, is things that are conceived from the beginning to live across these different platforms. If you're thinking about, you know, how do I tell a story? How do I keep people engaged in that story for a long period of time? How do I keep people kind of coming back to this thing over and over again because I want to invest in something along those lines. I want to get utility out of it. And if I want to tell these linear stories in between, how do I stitch together this part and this part and this part? How do I keep you engaged in between episode 1 and episode 2? I think that these kinds of things, you know, conceptually are going to be what you're going to see a lot of these major media companies tackling right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be utilizing a lot of your personal information, a lot of your biometrics to make sure that it's going to be an experience that's tailored for you.
They are, but there are also going to be creative people having creative ideas that sit on top of that information.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, the layering and the layering and the layering.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I think we covered a lot of information here. It's just the two of us. There's no moderator.
Yeah, I don't know. We have nobody to tell us that we're out of time.
We have no questions or anything like that. should we put on the hook?
You want to listen to Hootie?
Does somebody have some Hootie?
Nah.
Just let that be the takeaway. You know, I mean, that's really what the takeaway is of this convergence of gaming and media, is recognizing not only the layered assets and then the layered due diligence, you know, it's the layered acquisition, the layered exploitation, the data that can be extracted from those things, how that's going to be a feedback loop, how much more immersive and tailored, again, you know, it keeps becoming a rehash in some ways of itself as it continues to mash up. It sounds new, novel, and creative, but once you keep doing the new, novel, and creative, is it still new, novel, and creative? Probably not. You can switch out the variables, but it's still the same sort of formula.
Yeah. And also just another thought, new, novel, and creative in this space doesn't always mean new, novel, and creative just from you know, storytelling standpoint. I Magic Leap, we did a big project with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and they were really focused on bringing theater into the future and making Shakespeare relevant in the 21st century. And they were using incredible combinations of motion capture technology to animate digital assets on screen. They were experimenting with augmented reality layers through, you know, sitting in the theater and watching things like that to tell the story of The Tempest or Hamlet, right? So it's not necessarily, oh my God, I've got this brand new epic world that I've made. There's so many opportunities to take things that we know and we love and we understand in one way and start to bring them and contextualize them in different ways, to open them up to brand new audiences. You know, how many, you know, kids got into like Boston and Kansas and like a bunch of weird music that they never heard before because of Guitar Hero. How many, you know, people are going to get into Shakespeare because they would never, you know, go to a play, but they would put on a VR headset and watch that kind of happen. You know, there's a really broad sort of market now for everybody. You know, everybody in my family, from the oldest to the youngest, is playing some kind of game. They're interacting with digital content on a daily basis. The barriers are coming down. So, you know, this isn't just for one type of person. It's not just one type of market. It's not just one type of genre. I think that it's across everything. And I think that's really like an exciting moment if you're creating and you're trying to get creative ideas out there, to know that like everything old is new again in some weird cliche way. I think that's super exciting.
I think that's actually a great way to end. That's perfect. Everything that's old is new again.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, everybody.